learning Bahasa Melayu or the Malay language in Malaysia is not necessarily about practicality. It is about ensuring that you have that national identity within you.
For our stereotype of that, because there's some. Welcome to the series of current issues, Voicelah. So this is like a series of episodes we will talk about like current issues and like hot topics like you guys always want to hear about nowadays. So as you audience doesn't know what Voicelah is all about, it's like a student newsroom that's run independently by the students, which is under the supervision of the School of Communication and Creative Arts, SCCA. From UOW Malaysia. So my name is Jonathan. So I'm currently the head of production of Voicelah. Before I start this show, I need to put disclaimer. So it's as a head of production, my speaking skill in general is not there really on par of the professional level. So just the audience can tolerate with me lah. So yeah. So right now we have a guest here. So sir, can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience here? Yeah.
Hi, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. So, if I may introduce myself, my name is Zaki. I am currently the academic department head for the School of Communication and Creative Arts. So, as you know, the School of Communication and Creative Arts, or SCCA, is the biggest school in UOW Malaysia in terms of number of programs. So, we have programs that covers both communication studies and design, as well as also we are the administrator of the MPU courses, as well as English compulsory subjects as well.
A little bit more background on Mr. Zaki here. So, so he's currently he has a Master of Art in Communication Management from the University of Eastern Finland, and he has a degree in psychology from the International Islamic University of Malaysia, IIUM. Correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So today from this topic is for me is quite heavy and it's a bit sensitive in Malaysia. I don't know if it's considered a 3R issue or not. I mean, for the looks of it, it's not really a 3R issue, but from the context of Malaysia, right, you know how things going on, it's kind of a 3R issue. But it's quite interesting to talk about. Is that the issue of the Malay language, the Bahasa Melayu, whether it's relevant or not in this country. As you all know, right? As we all know, like Bahasa Melayu is according to the constitution, right? Malay, the Article 152, BM is the main language in Malaysia, and everyone cannot doubt it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, even though there's a lot of types of school in Malaysia. I mean, in terms of like sekolah kebangsaan or SCCA or something like that. Even though there's different types of schools, right? Every school needs to taught in Bahasa Melayu. So, but even on that, there's some communities within Malaysia that don't seem to, consider Bahasa Melayu is a respected language. I don't know how to say it. I don't know if it's suitable to say that. Yeah. It's not really respected language, so some radical comments within some communities in Malaysia say that BM is not so important one. So when you go overseas, BM doesn't really relevant anymore. So for the statement above, for what I said just now, is it true to say that BM is hard to equip for all communities in Malaysia? Because from my community point of view, there's some radical views is that because English is the international language. So, and plus recently China, for the past 10 years, China has become a global superpower. So Mandarin has become a emerging global language. So some radical views that you only need to learn English and Mandarin, Chinese language, just enough already. Yeah, plus because some of the jobs that want to like Mandarin speaker is quite a, how to say, preference, right? So, as a Malay Muslim, so how do you see this trend going on?
All right, so this is obviously a heavy issue, which I probably can talk a lot about. All right, so let me come back to your first point, whether this is an issue that can be considered to be part of 3R. I would say yes, because one of the R over there is race. So in relation to race, you have the issue of the national language. So amongst the Malay people, and I think within the Malaysian community, there is this issue also in terms of how do you call this language? Is it Malay language? Or is it Bahasa Melayu? Or is it Bahasa Malaysia? So within the Malay community, they are very clear. They would like the language to be known as Bahasa Melayu because that represents their race, the native mother tongue language of the community. Alright, now coming to your question with regards to the practicality of learning Bahasa Melayu. Now, if you want to look at this from the point of view of from a practical usage point of view, obviously learning Malay over here in Malaysia is not necessarily something that you need. If you consider, for example, I've known quite a number of expatriates, people who live here in Malaysia for many years, some of them for decades. So living here in Malaysia, you can survive without knowing anything about the Malay language. Why? Because people over here understand English. So that is something that I often say, one of the blessings Malaysia being a former British colony. But then of course there are other layers that we can investigate when it comes to the whole period of colonization. But at least when it comes to one particular benefit that you can see until today is English is still widely spoken. Now, that is a clear thing that no one can deny. However, the thing that we need to understand, language is an issue when it comes to discussion of national unity, and also in relation to the constitution, obviously, here in Malaysia. Now, learning Bahasa Melayu or the Malay language in Malaysia is not necessarily about practicality. It is about ensuring that you have that national identity within you. So that is something important. Now, we in Malaysia, in a way that we are not that concerned about national unity as part of national identity, national language as part of national identity, because we have English. But if you look at other examples of countries, even within the region, say for example Indonesia, right? So Indonesia is a country which is very large, stretching from Sumatra in the east until Irian Jaya, Papua New Guinea, almost in the west. So within the community or society in the Indonesian Republic, there are actually multiple languages. But what binds them together? They have one national language, which is Bahasa Indonesia. Bahasa Indonesia, I don't want to get into trouble with my Indonesian friends. Bahasa Indonesia is essentially Bahasa Melayu lah. But originally, in terms of its origin. But then, of course, I understand Indonesians are very, very, very particular about this. They don't necessarily like to equate Bahasa Indonesia with Bahasa Melayu, because Bahasa Melayu represents a specific group of people. Bahasa Indonesia represents the entire nation. So learning Bahasa Indonesia is essential for national unity in Indonesia, because that is the language spoken by everyone, despite the differences of dialect and the regional, accent that they have. So likewise, also when you look into Thailand, so learning the Thai language becomes important as part of the national identity. Over here in Malaysia, what makes it different is that we have always, in our history as an independent nation,
divide and rule.
Divide and rule, I think, is looking at it from one negative side. I would say more in terms of our approach with regards to national unity in relation to our diversity, cultural diversity over here, is that we have never imposed a policy of assimilation, as in that everyone needs to follow the culture of the majority. We don't have that policy. Indonesia, Thailand, they have that. So you could be someone who is Chinese in Indonesia, but you need to learn Bahasa Indonesia. You need to follow, even when it comes to your name also, you must have a Javanese Indonesian name. Same also in Thailand. So they emphasize on that you need to assimilate with the culture of the majority. So in Malaysia, we don't have that. So the history behind that on why we don't really impose that, I think there's a long history to that. But I would say from a practical point of view, even though the Malay community is the majority, but at the start of our history as an independent nation, the Malay community as a majority group over here was not a very big majority. It was only about 55% around that. Now it is growing because of various reasons, but still it is enshrined in our constitution that the Malay language is part of national identity. So because of that, from that point of view, it must be respected. So because it is something that, it is also something that is a very sensitive issue when it comes to political debates. So when you see, for example, the kind of arguments, the kind of discourse that you have amongst political parties, political politicians, right? When it comes to discussing about racial unity and so on, Malay groups will always emphasize on the importance of respecting the Malay language, memartabatkan bahasa Melayu. So that is something important on that part. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize also, right? Something that you mentioned, which I totally agree from a practical point of view, that English is the language of the international community. Mandarin is the language that is spoken in mainland China, which is a growing superpower. So I think those things cannot be denied. But always, I think what we need to try and see in terms of our approach and attitude when it comes to this is, why can't we have all? So you can learn English, you can learn Chinese, fine, but you need to learn Malay. So
does it make it a burden for some communities, right? Yeah.
Now we see that as a burden over here in Malaysia, but I can tell you there are many countries in the world where children in school, they learn multiple languages, 4 to 5 languages. So it shouldn't be really that difficult. Now, I wanted to come to a point when it comes to, if you want to look into just, if you go outside of Malaysia and, the kind of attitude that if you go outside of Malaysia, no one speaks Malay. But I can tell you, I as you mentioned, I studied for my master's degree in Finland. So Finland is a very small country, right? In terms of size, it's about the size of Malaysia, but population is only about 5 million. So in Finland, the national language is the Finnish language, which is a very, unique language, not easy to learn. However, within the Finnish community, similar when it comes to how they emphasize on national identity, anyone that comes over there, you need to learn the Finnish language. I've seen myself examples of immigrants who come to Finland, either asylum seekers or people who migrate over there. One of the things they need to really get through in order for them to get Finnish citizenship is they need to pass Finnish language tests. Now, if you look into practicality, learning Finnish language doesn't get you anywhere, because outside of Finland, no one speaks that. Not even in Sweden, not even in Denmark, because the Finnish language is very, very unique. But you need to learn that still because you need to respect the constitution from a legal point of view. The other thing is that is the language spoken by the majority in the society. So from that angle, that practical example is looking into how you need to ensure that you are able to blend in with the majority culture. Now, if I may go also to another angle when it comes to how sensitive language can be when it comes to in discussion about national identity and also politics to a certain extent.
I think there's a different of the language. It's because the cultures, because the language also ties to the race and the culture in the context of Malaysia. Because of that, so I think the difference between the values between the races, like the Malays and the Chinese, have been it's like I would say it's too big, So it's
now,
like,
what we have seen over the years is, as what you described, within the Chinese community, especially, there's for the last 2 decades, since the 1990s, and since mainland China began to develop economically, so there's a greater awareness about learning Mandarin. But if you go back during the time of myself when I was in school in the 1980s, or even further back, within the Chinese community, not many actually learn to speak Mandarin because the preference when it comes to school was actually national school. So a lot of people, they learn more the colloquial language, Cantonese, Hokkien, and so on. But when it comes to Mandarin, unless they actually go for extra classes, which we used to have in national school, we have Mandarin classes on Saturdays, but it's hardly enough when it comes to mastery of the Mandarin of the Chinese language, especially the written part, isn't it? So what has happened is, in our society today, which is of no harm and not for us to put any blame to anyone, it's something natural, I believe, when it comes to any group of people. You have a certain sense of attachment to your culture, right? To your original culture, to your ethnic culture. So within the Chinese communities, there is a greater awareness now about learning Mandarin. So parents now also, even though they may not speak Mandarin themselves, they would force their kids to learn Mandarin because they think they feel it's something really important for them to learn.
Well, I don't think it's like preserved for more like an economic benefit, but not for for the sake of cultural preservation,
Yeah, I think it has to look into both sides. Yeah. I think the learning from an economic point of view, supposedly you can perhaps go for the Chinese market or go for jobs in China. So those are practical things also. But I think learning as part of the cultural heritage is something important as well. Now, what in the end, what I feel what we need to have is a balance. It's okay for anyone who wants to learn their mother tongue language. I think that is something that is protected also within our constitution over here in Malaysia, and I think we shouldn't be touching upon that in terms of changing it or to call for satu sekolah untuk semua, one school for all. I think there's too much competition if you really want to do that over here in Malaysia. I always feel there must be a way. We can try harder, think harder about ensuring that every Malaysian are able to speak, not just 2, maybe 3 languages, if not possible, if possible even 4. So it can be done if we are able to think about how the best approach when it comes to this. I understand learning Mandarin, because I've tried to learn Mandarin myself also. It's not an easy language for you to master, so you require a lot of hours in order to really look into this, especially when it comes to the writing part. So naturally, when it comes to Chinese vernacular schools, a lot of hours is emphasized on the Chinese language lessons. But I think there is always a way that you can fit in the lessons for the Malay language and also English, so that children are able to master all. At the same time also, I think within the Malay community, and something that perhaps sometimes we forget to realize, within the Malay community, yes, we speak standard Malay language, but there's also some ethnic Malay languages that is not being preserved. Like the Javanese, the Banjaris, they have their own language. It's considered to be a branch of the Malay language, but there's something a bit unique about that also. So I think maintaining that, preserving that, is I think is important as part of cultural heritage. So there must be a way for us to have all of that within our national syllabus that we are able to preserve and ensure our current generation and future generation are able to master these languages.
Okay, so I think I need to mention this. So as whatever your race or religion, as a Malaysian, we need to speak and to write. And
it doesn't have to be perfect Bahasa Melayu.
Yes, basic.
For me personally, the style of speaking Malay with Chinese slang or Indian slang, I think is something cute, something nice, which is part of the Malaysian identity. You don't have to be able to speak in such a way like a native speaker, like a Malay native speaker with Kelantanese dialect and so on. But if you are able to, then it's okay. But you must be able to at least converse. And I think when it comes to basic writing, because you live in this country where your official language when it comes to letters, when it comes to government announcements, when you go to any government offices, it's written in Malay. From that point of view, I think you need to, tell yourself that, I need to learn this so that I know, where to find information, so that I don't get confused when it comes to any things that are being explained to me. So I think that is something, that I believe the attitude that we should have. We respect the status of the language, and we learn that for practical reasons also, because we live in this country. Unless, of course, if someone thinks that I don't want to live in this country at all and it's something else. even that also, I think it's a big waste if you don't learn, because
your identity, right?
If you learn Malay also, to be honest, actually, in terms of the number of native speakers, right, of the Malay language, if you include Bahasa Indonesia as basically a branch of Bahasa Melayu or Malay language, it's actually one of the widest speaking native languages in the world also, because Indonesia is about 300 million people.
Yeah, fourth biggest country.
And then Malaysia, and then Brunei, Southern Thailand, Southern Philippines, Singapore, right? So this entire region within the Malay archipelago, Malay is the lingua franca still. So I think knowing the Malay language is a great advantage for us to have.
Okay, so actually, we are conducted a street interview here. Is that we testing about our university students about their Malay language skills. We test whether they are available or not. This is a 2-minute video. You can see first, then later you can talk about it. Kamu suka terhadap universiti ini semasa kamu belajar kat sini?
Senyap lah. Cikgu di sini pun bagus dan minat dengan mengajar murid-murid.
Fasiliti yang disediakan oleh universiti ini sangat mempermudahkan semua pelajar-pelajar untuk bergerak dan pergi satu tempat ke satu tempat yang lebih cepat.
Selain itu, apa-apa bahagian universiti ini patut membuat lebih baik untuk memastikan pelajar kita boleh belajar dalam suasana yang selesa dan mudah?
Kalau boleh, ada satu gym lah. Kerana sini murid-murid saya tengok bukan semua orang suka bersenam lah. So ada satu gym akan bagus. Ada boleh buat satu promosi.
Makanan cafeteria can make more food shops here lah. Open more restaurants here.
Fasiliti macam aircon dalam lecture hall lah.
Boleh memperbaiki internet ataupun wifi.
So just now we are just like testing our Malaysian students about their Bahasa Malaysia skills. In your guys' opinion, do you think that Bahasa Melayu is relevant to your daily lives? Whether it is going to classes or work or handling daily tasks or even when you are in entertainment activities?
Yeah, nearly everything. There's generally a lot of people who have a preference for something that's not English in Malaysia. So I think it is important to at least have Malay as one of the languages you know.
I think it's quite relevant lah because Malaysia is mostly where Malay lives lah. So sometimes some of them don't speak English. So most of the time I have to communicate to them in Malay, especially when I'm working lah.
Mostly I use English in my daily life but when I go mamak, I often use Bahasa Melayu.
My first language, I think it's Malay, so I do have some preference in speaking Malay on certain situations like when ordering food and whatnot. But when it comes to work, it depends. Most people would prefer to speak English because it's the most common language here, in my opinion.
I think so because as Malaysians, we can't run away from having to speak Malay, and we sometimes campur BM with English, rojak sikit.
Okay, so it's like we're issue interview lah. So how do you think is our university students about their Malay skills?
To be honest, I think there's a lot of areas of improvement. I think from pronunciation and also the use of correct words and phrases, I think there are things that can be improved. But again, like I said, the way that Malaysians speak Bahasa Melayu is to me, personally, I find it rather unique and it's really kind of cute. All this rojak and everything. I think it's part of our national identity to have it like that. Of course, you may have certain people within the Malay community who are sometimes make fun about this. They criticize the non-Malay communities. So it shouldn't be like that. I feel over here in Malaysia we have committed to a certain social contract, so to speak, that we respect the rights of everyone when it comes to preserving your ethnic cultural identity and languages. So I think we need to honor that. It's just that doing that, learning about learning your mother tongue and so on should not be at the expense of learning Bahasa Melayu and also learning English. Because I think there are some people who argue to the extreme also that I just need to learn one language, I don't even care about learning English. It shouldn't be like that because we should be able to do that. It's just a matter of maybe over here in Malaysia, it is an exception. rather than the rule. By right, the rule is Malaysians should be very proficient multilinguist when it comes to the languages that we speak.
Speaking about the university, right? When I test about the Bahasa Melayu, did I know about why universities in Malaysia? Even though I asked some of my friends from the public university like UPM or something when I asked them, even UITM I asked them, what language do you learn or like the teachers learn? They say English. It was like weird, so weird. It's like they are like a public university, but why the university is conduct in English one? Because recently there's a news about our Prime Minister Ibrahim saying that they want the university students in Malaysia, including the foreign students, to master in both Bahasa Melayu and the English.
No, actually, if I may, correct your point. Right? The Prime Minister was not really talking about learning Bahasa Melayu, but not necessarily to the point that you have to achieve a very advanced level of mastery, especially when it comes to international students. The policy is, as what we know when it comes to the MPU subjects, right, that are taken by international students, they must take at least one Bahasa Melayu subject, which is a very basic Bahasa Melayu subject, where they learn only the basic words, the numbers and things like that. So that is there. I think that one is something, I think it's a nice opportunity for every foreign students coming over here to just learn this basic Malay language course. Now, when it comes to learning Malay from the point of view of the Prime Minister, here is where I think I need to refresh maybe the memories and maybe share some information about the background of this man, our Prime Minister today. Now, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, he himself was a graduate in Malay Studies. So that's why his Malay language ability is rather at a very high level, because he is someone who is very much into Malay literature, both modern and also classical. So because of that, his language proficiency with the Malay language is really very advanced. So when he was the education minister in Malaysia, when I was in school, 1986 until 1990, he changed the UPSR subjects. Right? So there are 5 subjects, yes, but 3 of the subjects were actually BM subjects. Bahasa Melayu Penulisan, Lisan, and also Penulisan. So they are separated into 3. So the emphasis at that time, because of his background in Malay language studies, and he really wanted all Malaysians to learn the Malay language. And at that point, within the non-Malay communities, they were okay with that because the emphasis was on national identity, the importance of learning Malay language. But of course, later on, things changed because of the rise of China and things like that. And also, there are some issues also in terms of national schools that some non-Malay, non-Muslim parents don't consider to be suitable because of a certain approach. So that's a different issue. So, but still, I think the bottom line, what needs to understand is it's still important for the part of national identity. What was the point that you mentioned just now also about universities in Malaysia? Now, UKM, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, was established specifically for the reason of having a university that does everything in Bahasa Melayu. Because University Malaya before, the first university in Malaysia, it was taught everything in English. So UKM was actually established for that, in order to have a university where higher education is provided using Malay as the medium of instruction. So that remains until today. But true, the challenge always when it comes to teaching, especially in higher education level, is lack of references, books. So because of that, lecturers will always, even though they are teaching in UPM, they will have to mix English and Malay because the references are mostly in English. And that is something that I would say is struggle and a challenge amongst Malay academics in terms of publishing books or coming up with books in the Malay language. And that is an ongoing challenge that Prime Minister Anwar, when he was Education Minister also, because at that time Education Ministry covers higher education also, he was actually going into that. So he established, for example, a specific project in translating the major works that we have in the English language to Malay, and also Chinese also. Yeah? There are some Chinese philosophical books that were actually translated into Malay during his time when he was Education Minister.
Let's say they say that all universities cannot teach in English anymore because I need to teach Malay. Only in Malay. And this podcast hanya boleh cakap dalam bahasa Melayu saja. So because there's you see our neighboring countries, Thailand or Indonesia, even like Japan, South Korea, the universities is taught by their national language one. But why like Malaysia is quite unique one. It's taught in English.
Yeah, I think the alternative universe that you are imagining, I think in reality, it's almost impossible to happen.
I think it was scare away
over here in Malaysia, the system has been like that. So for us to make such radical changes is really not practical. Okay, so I don't foresee that ever happening. Even in the scenario that, for example, if the opposition party now takes over the government in the future, which is the political party in the opposition, which is a bit more currently being seen a bit more fighting for Malay rights and so on, I don't think they would be making any drastic changes when it comes to our education system, both at the school level, K-12 education, and also higher education, because it's something already there. So you can't really emphasize on drastic changes like that. But what may be emphasized is a greater enforcement when it comes to learning Malay. But how do you do that? I don't think it's something that is that easy and practical to do also. What I have discussed before in some workshops I have been part of at the national level is that we need to bring the syllabus between vernacular schools and national school, the BM level, to be the same. The vernacular school syllabus for Bahasa Melayu needs to be, improved a bit, and the national school Bahasa Melayu needs to be lowered down a bit. So you find something in the middle. Because the Malay language, of course, I'm biased as a Malay native speaker. I think it's a very easy language to learn. Especially when it comes to learning how to read, especially because it's a phonetic language. You know the sound of the letters, you know how to read Bahasa Melayu. It's just vocabulary you need to, pembedaran kata tu you need to build up when it comes to reading and also speaking. But learning Bahasa Melayu shouldn't be a problem, right? When it comes to, for daily conversations and things like that. One of the students just now in the video mentioned about, the importance of learning English is much more when it comes to working and so on, which is true. But on one hand, one has to remember, if you were to work in this country and you have to bid for projects, for example, that relates to government agency, so you need to be able to pitch your ideas and make presentations in Bahasa Melayu. So I think if you don't have that, I think it's a big loss on your part in terms of opportunities that you can get when it comes to government contracts and government tenders and so on. So those are the things I think that within the Malaysian community overall, we need to appreciate that. So it's something that we need to understand, not just from the point of view of national identity and philosophy, but also in terms of practical benefit over here in Malaysia.
Yeah, as you mentioned, that Bahasa Melayu is important. So so we will take a break first, and after that we will go into like the issue of vernacular school and the issue of Jawi.
It all started last summer, met at the campus.
I think I might have been falling in love with you.
No, I feel the same way. He's always busy at work, and we got time to spend together. It's like I can't feel that he's really there for me.
What are you talking about? Of course I care.
I think it's time for us to take a break.
What? No, Steph, please don't do this.
Okay, so welcome back to our special episode of like the current issues Voicelah. So as you mentioned, talk about the issue of the Bahasa Melayu in this country, right? Actually, prior to this conversation, I have already done a simple poll towards like an Instagram post thanks to UOW confession lah. So it's the thing that I'll put a post about whether our university students is fluent in Bahasa Melayu and whether it's important and relevant to their lives lah. Okay, so when I first designed this question lah, I expect the A part, the fluent and important part is around like 70 to 80% because most of them are Malaysian, right? They should know, right? But surprisingly, it's only like a bit half only, 52%. So, but still, the ones who choose like the important one are still like 76%, like 75%. But you can see the unimportant, the ones who choose unimportant, that's 14%, 24%. But I mean, it's not a majority, right? But it's still quite a sizable community.
Yeah. So,
a lot of Malaysians think that Bahasa Melayu is not really that important, not really that relevant in their lives. So, are you seeing this as a problem?
Yeah, I think anyone who thinks that Bahasa Melayu is not important, I think that's not right. I think you need to understand. Again, I don't want to emphasize so much on the constitution, general identity point of view. Look at it from a practical point of view. You live over here in this country and you know that is the language, official language used by government, the government communication. So if you don't know that, it becomes a problem. So whenever, for example, there is any news announcements are done primarily in Malay, not every announcements and notice boards over here in Malaysia are in dual languages, Malay and English. So some of them just in Malay. So if you don't know that, I think it's just not practical for you when it comes to getting around over here. And the other thing is, as I mentioned, it is the language that is used in government communication. So that provides you opportunity if you're doing business and so on, for you to engage in government agencies and so on, to work together with them, to win government projects and things like that. So it's a loss, I think, if you don't actually take those opportunities. So learning Malay is important for that purpose also. Now, probably when it comes to the question over there, it's not that I want to nitpick in terms of how you ask the survey question, but then I think the word fluent and not fluent is something which is very subjective. I think some respondents probably think fluent means that you speak like a native speaker. So because of that, they consider themselves to be not so fluent. So I think when it comes to level of fluency, that requires a bit of clarification what you mean by that.
Yeah, because there's a community say that we speak Rojak language.
So one of the things that remains an issue over here in Malaysia, you learn Bahasa Melayu when you were in school. So there are many of us who our Malay language skills up until Form 5, our age 17, it's decent, it's very good. But when you work, especially you go to private university and then you work in the private sector where they use English more. As a result of that, you lose your Malay language skills. So there are many of us, including myself to a certain extent, I've lost my proficiency level when it comes to Malay, especially when it comes to writing. But it's something that I can still do. Requires a bit of practice in order to learn to come back to that level. So that is a challenge, right? So that's why the Prime Minister have said something like, when it comes to universities especially, and all private sectors, when it comes to all letters that you send to government agencies, write in Malay. Right, so that is again to emphasize that is the language of communication at the official level. Right? But then of course we understand English remains the primary language when it comes to commercial purposes.
Yeah, because
if you sign any agreements with banks, for example, right, they say if there is any discrepancy between the Malay version, English version, the English version would prevail.
Yeah, plus like the Sabah Sarawak, they have some sort of autonomy, right? Yeah, because they still consider English as the official language. So
I think in the Malay language is still the only official language in Sabah and Sarawak. It's just that in Sabah and Sarawak, they have more autonomy when it comes to certain issues. So that's why the Education Ministry within the Sarawak government have mentioned that they are going to emphasize more when it comes to learning English, which is okay, it's within their rights. But they won't be doing that in such a way saying that you don't need to learn Malay anymore. It's just that English is given greater emphasis, but the Malay language is still being needs to be understood.
Yeah, because when I see the news lately, because whenever like the government want to do more like Malay centric policy, the Sabah Sarawak the government are always like the most how to say
they won't really resist too much, because you need to remember Sabah and Sarawak, they have a lot more minority ethnic groups that have their own languages. It's not Malay, but they speak their primary language, common language is still Malay. So of course with the Sabah dialect and Sarawak dialect and so on, but it's still Malay language. So the Malay language is still emphasized on that point. It's just that they are looking from a commercial point of view lah. Right? If you learn English, you are proficient in the English language, you are able to compete more when it comes to more business opportunities and job opportunities in the future, which is true. I mean, no one should deny that. Okay, so but again, I like I mentioned earlier, learning Malay is not necessarily about learning to the point that you become like native speakers. Right? As long as you are able to converse and understand, and also read and write, at least when it comes to standard formal Malay, I think that should be okay. Not to the level of Malay literature, of course. That one is something else.
Yeah. Okay. So well, in terms of like the issue of this, right? You cannot talk away from the issue of vernacular schools in this country. I mean, there's a lot of headlines lately about a lot of issue regarding about like some news about like the vernacular school some like Chinese schools doesn't keen on learning Bahasa Melayu. Their Bahasa Melayu kind of fail. It's like some politicians say that they must close down vernacular schools for the sake of unity lah. So, in your opinion, as a Malay Muslim kind of perspective, so do you agree that we need to follow neighboring countries like Thailand, like Indonesia, even Singapore? Because we always tell that we need to learn more from Singapore for the sake of unity, right? But Singapore already closed down. In context, there is a Chinese university in Singapore called the Nanyang University, back in which already established since the 1950s, 60s. But during the 1980s, the Singapore government took a really radical decision, is to close down the Nanyang University, which is really Chinese medium based.
They took over and changed
it to right now the Nanyang Technical NTU, right? The Nanyang Technical University. So we always tell that we need to learn for Singapore, right? But Singapore already abolished all these vernacular schools already since the 80s lah, and everyone teach English one, and consider their mother tongue as their second language. So for the sake of unity lah, in Malaysia, you will put in Malaysia lah, should we just close down vernacular schools?
Now you've mentioned like Singapore as an example, and also Thailand, Indonesia as another. Now, Thailand and Indonesia is completely assimilation. You learn only the Thai language and the Bahasa Indonesia as part of the national education system. So there's no vernacular schools in Thailand, in Indonesia also. Singapore is a unique case. Now, I don't quite agree with the general point of view that we need to learn from Singapore, of everything. Singapore is something, it's a small island with a small population, so because of that, you can control things a bit more. But when it comes to a country like Malaysia, with its larger and bigger complexity, it's not that easy for you to impose something like that. I understand. I'm a great admirer of Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, founding father of Singapore. So when he, when Singapore became independent, 1965, so obviously you need to decide in terms of how do you emphasize when it comes to national identity in relation to education system. So his way was, okay, we take only English as the one that is neutral. It's neither the Malay nor Chinese or the Indians, neither of your native tongues, native languages. So you take English. Now, can we do that over here in Malaysia? I think it's not necessary. Again, my point of view is we can and we should be able to learn all. Now, over here in Malaysia, we have never disregarded or brought down the status of English. It is still the language that is used when it comes to commercial purposes in the private sector, in the business sector, and so on. So because of that, I think what we have is status quo. The current practice over here in Malaysia suits the complexity of our community over here, the mix, the kind of diversity that we have. In Indonesia, he was able to impose that. You want to change something like that, and over here in Malaysia, I don't think that's practical. Right? In Singapore, now Lee Kuan Yew did not actually close down Chinese school. What he did was he pressured, he really imposed on learning English.
But
so
for perspective of a Chinese it's already represent a close down of a Chinese school already. But changed to English.
But he was very smart, I think if you read the whole history, he never ordered for the vernacular schools or even the Nanyang Polytechnic to change. It's just that he imposed certain rules when it comes to learning English. As a result, that strain put a lot of pressure on these Chinese institutions that eventually they just phase out. But I think now, of course, there's a greater awareness about learning Mandarin. Lee Kuan Yew himself, he wasn't really he didn't speak Mandarin when he was young. He only learned Mandarin much later. So that is something that he felt also something that's part of his identity. So I think that's something that we ought to consider. My view is vernacular schools should not be closed. I think that is something that is enshrined in our constitution also, mother tongue education. So I think the way it is, I think is just nice. But to bring the national identity issue part within the community is we need to emphasize on some level of proficiency in the Malay language and also English, so that all of our children are able to communicate at least in these two languages. So I think the emphasis should be on that. And of course also, as you can see over there is a growing number of Malay people who actually go to, Malay parents who send their kids to Chinese school because they also want their kids to be proficient in Mandarin for various reasons. So I think that is something which is nice. My hope and dream, right, if I may share, I think I imagine if we are able to really revise our national education structure. Our national education structure should be in such a way that all Malaysians, when you are in national school, you learn 3 languages. Right? So Malay, English, and the other one could be Chinese, or could be Arabic, or could be Tamil. But you learn that under one national school syllabus or national school structure. What I mean by that is you do it elective, and you can do it within the school hours. What becomes a challenge over here in Malaysia is always that the number of hours that we spend in school is not enough, right, in my opinion, because we are constrained with physical resources. So you have the physical resources in terms of having morning and afternoon session by right. And I always feel this personally, and I got in some arguments with people when I say this, that I think school students in Malaysia, they spend too little time in school. They should actually be in school a bit more. So like in private schools, right, many private schools over here in Malaysia, children come around 7 or 8 a.m. They leave around 3 or 4 p.m. I think that is the way. So the way that we should have this in the afternoon is where you learn these, third languages or fourth languages if possible, and also other living skills. But then, of course, to have something like that requires financial investment, and that
parents complain,
and that is not that easy. But I think that is ideally, I would say, the way that we preserve national identity through education by having a certain standard level of syllabus when it comes to the languages.
Okay, so in terms of vernacular schools, so I mean for the Malay community, I see some communities, especially the community, some say why some of our minority in this country are so really the gil. So what's the point of keeping on this vernacular school when like the birth rate, especially Chinese is dropping significantly, and you can see some of the micro Chinese school are struggling to get new students, and they are facing the risk of closing down. So they could foresee that the vernacular schools are getting closed down in one day. So from my perspective, it's not we don't want to abolish, it's not we want to unite together in one school. It depends on what the language we are going to learn. Because some of the communities, you say that if English is fine, but Malay no, cannot. Because they learn from the Singapore model, right? They learn for English one. Okay, so because I think that you Malays, you learn the syllabus in your first language, but we learn from a second language point of view. So it's kind of unfair in terms of like the academic performance. So it's like an issue.
Now you cannot. I mean, for practical reasons, it's almost impossible to abolish vernacular school. I always say this. The main reason is because the system has always been very open, and it's not just if you want to emphasize, or anyone who tries to imagine abolishing vernacular schools and have only like satu sekolah untuk semua kan. You have to take into account it's not just vernacular schools that you should close. You should close also all the private international schools. Yes. And within the Malay Muslim community, there's also a lot of private religious schools. So if you really want to do that, is anyone really willing to do something drastic like that? I don't think so. So I believe that we need to be smarter on this now. And there are ways that you can try and do without making drastic changes. Alright? So emphasize on the importance of learning these languages and not denying the rights of minority groups to learn their mother tongue, their native languages as well. So I think if we have mutual respect on that part, we should be okay. Again, I really hope that all Malaysians can see that learning Bahasa Melayu is not just about respecting the constitution and things like that. It's about practical reason for being over here in Malaysia, because you need to deal with government agencies. You need to perhaps also bid for government projects and things like that. You need to make if you run a business,
especially in my kampung, no one speaks English.
Even here in the towns also, like if you run a business like retail or food and beverages and so on, because of the growing majority of the people are the Malay community. So these are your biggest group of customers, potential customers. So you don't speak their language. So it's a big loss on your part. So look at that look at this from that point of view. I think we ought to be able to come to a common understanding about why it is important.
So so in terms of like we mentioned before, like the language itself is already tied with the race's identity and the culture of itself. So we Chinese we have the three pillars of keeping the Chinese culture identity. The Chinese media, the Chinese clans, and like the Hokkien Cantonese, and the most important one, the Chinese education. So if one of these disappear, then the whole Chinese culture is disappear already. Okay, so I want to share my experience. As you don't know, right? I attended in my secondary school. I attended the Chinese Independent Secondary School. As you don't know, right? Is for you guys who don't know, right? It's like why these schools appear in the first place is because like there are Chinese schools prior independence but if I'm not wrong, it's during the Education Act of 1961 when the government forced the Chinese schools to either change to SMK or like SMJK and get the government subsidies, or if you don't want, yes, you can open, but you are converted to really private schools. So for the funding, you must find for yourself. If you close down, not my business. So I was attend one of these schools. So the syllabus besides the English and the Malay language, all the subjects and the syllabus are all in Chinese one. Okay, so when I was in Form 3, in the Mandarin lesson, we learned a subject, a chapter. It's about the last lesson, which is Alfonso Daudet. Is for you guys who don't know what the story is about, it's like during the Prussian War. It's like the Germany war between the Prussia and France. Prussia win over France. So when France defeated, Germany decided to annex the parts of France. So when a boy from that area, when he go to school, he found out something really odd. The class was usually filled with few people only, but this time a lot of people. It's because they wanted to attend the last French lesson. It is because after Germany annexed these areas, they say that you cannot teach any French anymore. You must only teach in German and to speak in German from now on. So everyone is very emotional. If they cut off one language, the language of theirs means cut off their identity as a whole. So it's a bit funny okay. So my teacher has set a scenario. Is that use this scenario as an example. If let's say one day China decided to annex Malaysia and to force that, you cannot teach in Malay anymore. You must only teach in Chinese. And you guys want our reaction? Our tutor, yes. I mean, it's kind of weird So what I want to try to say is that we Chinese Malaysians have a bit of sense of identity crisis. Some, because they too much focus on the Chinese identity and try to forget the Malaysian identity of theirs. In terms of Malaysian identity of theirs, it means that they must converse in Malay well.
So I think within the Chinese community over here in Malaysia, that is a unique challenge that you are in, because if you know, for example, and we have a few students over here who are from Indonesia but they are Chinese. They speak Bahasa Indonesia obviously very well because that's the language they learn in school, but they speak Chinese, but they learn Chinese more informal kind of education at home or within their clan and community. So over here in Malaysia, because we allow people to preserve their cultural identity, so there is a sense that sometimes a conflict that exists, whether or not you want to emphasize more on your cultural ethnic identity or you want to emphasize on national identity. Again, my answer to that is, why can't you have both? So it shouldn't be an issue when it comes to having both, because they are not something which is, at polar opposite between each other. It's actually something that can actually be together in one, in one whole reality. So if you mention, for example, the case of hypothetically, if China were to invade or annex Malaysia and impose something like that, obviously the Malay majority over here would rebel, because national language or native language is a very strong, powerful political issue. You don't have to go far looking into European history. Here in Asia, if you look into the country now that it's known as Bangladesh, historically, Bangladesh was actually East Pakistan.
Yes.
So, West Pakistan, as we know now, the language that they speak over there is Urdu. But in Bangladesh or in East Pakistan before, their language is Bengali. So, one of the main reasons why East Pakistan fought for independence was because they wanted to maintain their national identity in reference to the Bengali language. They don't want to adopt Urdu. So people died as a result of that for the fight of independence in Bangladesh because of language. So it is a powerful issue that cannot be taken for granted. So I understand the sentiments within the Chinese community, especially when it comes to, because if you have to make priorities, right, you rather prioritize learning like English and Mandarin. Malay would be like number 3. Or,
something
like that. But be careful in terms of how you communicate this.
Yes.
You know, this is an issue that can be politically dangerous. So it's okay for you to emphasize individually in terms of, okay, I want to concentrate on this, learning Mandarin and English. Malay, I try to, but I only try as best as I can. It's okay to have that. I mean, that kind of priority is within your rights to explore. But never, take it to the point that you belittle. You make fun of the status of the Malay language, because you have to understand it's a sensitive issue. People fight for their national identity in reference to their national language or their native languages. So it's something that we need to understand, respect when it comes to living over here in Malaysia. That we can have honest, open discussion about issues. So we discuss like this. We discuss in an academic, civil way, but not to the point that we make fun of things. Okay, I think the thing about if, for example, how Malaysia can be developed more if you emphasize more on learning English or learning Chinese. I think it's okay for you to imagine things like that, but then understand in reality how it is. Because of that, it is a very powerful political issue that sometimes can result into unnecessary fighting, which I think we all want to avoid.
Kind of happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so because in terms of learning Bahasa Melayu, because some are not really equipped with the language, it's because for information so prior to independence Bahasa Melayu written form right now, the written form of Bahasa Melayu is in Rumi ABC. But before this the written form of Bahasa Melayu is in the language, the written form of Jawi. Jawi, as you guys don't know, Jawi is an Arabic form of writing Malay, is it right?
Basically writing Malay using Arabic letters.
Arabic, right? The modified Arabic letters, right? Okay. So because after the independence, the government decided to change the Jawi to Rumi, which is ABCD, to the main form of the writing form of Malay, because they wanted to see the Malay language is not just for the Malay people, but for all Malaysians. Because I see the trend recently. There's a rise of the Jawi, right? Because this some of the issues because there's a emerged trend of the usage of Jawi nowadays. I remember back in 5 years ago, there's a hot topic when the PH 1.0 government is in power. The deputy education minister at that time, YB Teo Ching, has said that as I don't know, it's already implemented, is that in the SCCA, the Bahasa Malaysia textbook, there's 2 to 3 pages of introducing Jawi.
Yeah.
The content, when I look at it, the exact content is just purely what is the Jawi on the banknotes is what the meaning is, and how to spell Malaysia in Jawi. That's all only.
Yeah.
But this decision has caused a really big uproar within the Chinese community. I remember there was a time, because even though this already only like a 2-3 page thing only, but we concern the thing is that there's a saying that boiling the frog in the warm water, which meaning is that you don't realize you are being cooked until you realize that it's already too late. You cannot reverse anymore.
Now here's where I think we need to look into this from both points of view. When it comes to the education minister's point of view, and the ministry points of view at that time, the minister Mazli Malik, I think what was introduced was not something new. In fact, this was something that was already decided prior to him becoming the Minister of Education. And again, you correctly mentioned that it was only 3 pages. That's it. Now, the reaction from the Chinese community, from the point of view of the Malay population, was a bit of an overreaction. I understand that there is this point of view saying that, okay, they start with 3 pages, later on become 6, become 10, and so on. Jawi is not Arabic. Jawi is
but for our stereotype of that. Because there's some Arabic words, because there's some Islamic element in it.
So again, over here, it's an overreaction in the sense it's 3 pages and only 3 pages. And it's not about learning anything which is religious. It's basically just those words that you see every day in your banknotes and the jata negara and the national emblem and things like that. So I think learning that, I think is something nice, practical for us to have, not just for Chinese students, but Malay students also, because not all Malay students learn no Jawi. So I think for us to have as part of our national heritage, I think it's something good. So here is where I think all of us, not just the Chinese community, within the Malay community also, I think we need to learn to not overreact. For example, when the Chinese are asking for funding for Chinese school, it's not that funding is given to Chinese school and no funding given to national school. It's just that if it's given more,
I think some media is kind of responsible.
So something that is given to the Chinese school, the education for the Malay school or national school remains the same, or it may be even higher. So overreacting when it comes to issues like this is something which is requires some level of control. We definitely can blame politicians for this because they want to pander for their local community, so they would use this as a way to rile the support of their local community. There is no need for that. All of us over here living in this country, we want the best for this country. We have differences of views in terms of what is the best approach. Fine, that's okay, but we talk and we try to find some form of agreement. If we cannot agree 100% on something, so we find a middle ground. That has always been our formula over here in Malaysia, and I think that's the unique part about this country, that we take into account the views of everyone. The PH 1.0 government, the Prime Minister was Dr. Mahathir. I remember many years ago when after he first stepped down as Prime Minister, he was attending a workshop where he was the main panelist. So he mentioned something which I think very practical. He said, now, when you are a Prime Minister of a country like Malaysia, how do you know that you're doing a good job? Right. So everyone was giving the answers. I mean, when you do this, you do this, you do that. So he said, it's very simple. You know that you are doing a good job when every group in the society is not happy about something. Means what? Means what? You are not being biased to any group. Right? All the groups will have their demands, but they are not all that can be met together. So you decide. You try to come to a consensus. What is the best solution that we can have that is best for everyone? So everyone in the end will have certain things that they are not happy about, which is fine. And that's how we live together.
Okay, another issue about the Bahasa Malaysia usage is that the issue of DLP, the dual language program, when about the mathematics and the science languages. I think that if I look back to the history, Thailand, prior to 2003, the language is taught in BM, right? The teacher. Until 2003, our education minister, I forgot who it is already. They say that they wanted to internationalize to the science, to prepare the students in terms of.
That one is the teaching of science and mathematics in English. Was in fact one of the last policies introduced by Prime Minister Mahathir before he stepped down for the first time, 2003.
Yeah. So, but after maybe 10 years later, the decision is suddenly reversed. Just back to Bahasa Melayu. So, my year at that time can write in both Malay and English. You can answer in both Malay and English also can. But the year after my year, it can only be write in Bahasa Melayu. So
I think the question papers for SPM is still dual language. So technically or theoretically speaking, you can answer in both. But then of course, if you went through the entire lessons in Malay, you would actually answer in Malay.
Yeah, because
there are some schools that are given DLP status. You can teach dual language. But again, it depends on the capabilities of the teachers, whether they are able to actually deliver the subject in English. So this is more, I would say, when it comes to teaching science and maths in English, it's not necessarily a interracial issue. It's more of a class issue. Within the upper middle class and upper class in the society compared to the others. So within the Malay community in urban areas, a lot of people want to learn science and maths in English. Also, many parents want that, but not necessarily in the rural area. So my view when it comes to this is, I think the approach that we have now is a nice middle approach. If you want to learn in English, so find a national school where they have the DLP. Go ahead, you can transfer school. But if you're comfortable learning in Malay in your current school, then stay there. So I think it's an option that you can explore. I think you provide that freedom for people to choose. I think that's okay. But at that point, I think the one of the biggest critic to that program was actually, or that policy was actually the Chinese vernacular school, because they had to also teach science and maths in English. So that
but for other subjects, they cannot teach in Chinese, right? So what's the difference?
So that becomes an issue also always. The problem when it comes to government policies over here in Malaysia, the intention is good, because you want students to be mastering the technical languages or technical terms, scientific terms in English, through many publications in science and technology, majority is in English. That's right. But the implementation of that policy, if you refer back, it was something that was first discussed or proposed in a political party meeting, UMNO General Assembly, and then very quickly it became a government policy introduced nationwide.
Because
without enough preparation when it comes to teaching or training teachers, coming up with references and so on. So when you do things like that, obviously it creates problem. So I feel that again, I like to think that you can have both. You can learn in Malay, but you can have also, there is a subject that I think it still exists at SPM level, English in science, English for science and technology. So there's a specific English subject where you learn, where you go through, where you study technical languages or technical terms in English. So I think that is something that can be made a compulsory subject, so that students are exposed during their secondary school years to reading some technical scientific journals in English, so they understand the lingo, the phrases and so on, so that when they transition going to university, especially if they go overseas or go to private institution or they follow any kind of international syllabus, they are able to transition more effectively.
Yeah. Okay, that would so I would like to end this episode here. So thank you for Mr. Zaki. I wanted to wants to mention that as a Malaysian, you don't need to speak fluent Bahasa Melayu, but at least you need to understand a bit and you can converse it basically, and that's what makes us a Malaysian as an entity as a whole. So yeah, so thank you for Mr. Zaki here. Thank you for watching for our episode 1 of our Current Issues Voicelah. So if you like this video, can like and subscribe, and not to follow our Voicelah official YouTube channel. So yeah, see you for the episode 2. Bye bye.